The memory of that trip is a stain on my life, a splinter of pure dread that has festered in my mind for decades. I've always hated camping. The grit under your nails, the chorus of unseen things skittering in the leaves, the way a sleeping bag becomes a clammy, constricting tube by 3 a.m. My father, a man carved from oak and stubbornness, saw this aversion as a character flaw to be corrected. Every summer, I was dragged into the silent, green depths against my will. The summer after my sophomore year, I finally negotiated a concession. I could bring a friend. I chose Charles, a former Boy Scout who genuinely loved the woods but, more importantly, loved mischief and hated his parents. He was my shield against boredom. Our victory was short-lived. A booking error deposited us not in a secluded forest, but at Pine Grove Leisure Acres, a travesty of a campground with concrete pads, electric hookups, and, unbelievably, a tiny, sad-looking amusement park called Funland pressed right against the tree line. The clash of contexts was jarring, the scent of pine undercut by the greasy odor of fried food and the silent, skeletal silhouettes of roller coasters against the twilight. My father was livid. Charles, ironically, became a purist snob. "This isn't real camping," he'd sneer, a joke that curdled into genuine condescension. The tension was a live wire. After a sullen dinner, Charles and I retreated. He'd smuggled in weed, and we smoked it deep in the thin woods bordering the garish park, the flashing leftover lights from Funland painting the trees in sickly, periodic hues of red and green. The high didn't mellow me, it sharpened my resentment and my sense of rebellion. Back at the tent, buzzing with nervous energy, Charles eyed the park's looming shadow. "Bet the view from the top of the Viper is insane," he whispered, a predatory grin on his face. The idea was madness. It was perfect. We slipped out past midnight. The world was a study in monochrome and deep, velvet shadows. Breaching the fence was laughably easy. Inside Funland, the silence was profound, a vacuum where the echoes of daytime screams should have been. The only sounds were the hum of distant generators and the occasional, unnerving squeak of a moving swing ride, pushed by no wind we could feel. We became ghosts, flitting from the cover of a ticket booth to the shadow of a tilt-a-whirl car. The thrill was laced with a new, metallic fear. This wasn't a game anymore, the darkness felt attentive. The roller coaster, the Viper, was a monstrous lattice of black iron. We took the maintenance ladder, our breaths coming in sharp gasps, the metal groaning a subtle protest with every step. At the summit, the world fell away. The campsite was a cluster of dull embers, the park, a geometric wound of pathways below. Charles snapped a single, flashless photo on a disposable camera, a dark, grainy testament. The wind-up there was cold and searching. Our descent was hurried, a sudden consensus of unease. The park seemed different on the return, darker, the shadows pooling thicker. We were nearly to the fence when a security cart's beam swept our path. We dove behind a shuttered funnel cake stand, pressing ourselves into the sticky, sugary-smelling wood. That's when I saw it. Movement in the deep gloom between the haunted house and a game booth. Not the methodical patrol of security, but a furtive, skittering motion. Charles's grip on my arm tightened like a vice. My eyes adjusted. 30 feet away, a figure was crouched. Not hiding from the cart, it seemed, but observing us. It was a man, but his posture was all wrong, a broken marionette of angles. He was shirtless, his pale skin gleaming with a sickly sheen under the sliver of moon. And then he moved. He didn't run, he scuttled, spider-like, across an open patch. For one horrific fraction of a second, he passed through a spill of security light. The image is burned into me, gaunt, hollowed cheeks streaked with dark, viscous fluid that was unmistakably blood. But it was the eyes wide, unblinking, and glittering with a feral, knowing intelligence that stopped my heart. He wasn't just a man, he was a predator in a human cage, and he had seen his next curiosity, us. He vanished into the shadows. The golf cart passed. We didn't speak. We ran, a blind, frantic scramble over the fence, our earlier stealth obliterated by raw terror. The safe, boring campsite was a sanctuary. We spent the remaining hours in our tent, not sleeping, barely breathing, listening to every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, convinced the scent of funnel cake and blood was clinging to us. Morning brought no relief, only a colder horror. A park ranger, face grim, made an announcement. A man had been found at a nearby lake, not just killed, but ritualistically disemboweled. The suspect, a severely disturbed individual, was at large, likely wounded, last seen heading toward the recreational areas. The description was our crouching figure, exactly. Charles and I locked eyes, a silent scream passing between us. We said nothing. Not to my dad, not to the rangers. Our reason was a juvenile, toxic cocktail of fear of punishment for trespassing, fear of being implicated, and a deeper, more primal fear that by speaking his name, by acknowledging what we saw, we would invite him back. We packed and left, the normalcy of our fathers grumbling about the wasted trip a surreal soundtrack to our internal screaming. We are bound by that silence still. Charles and I remain friends, successful on paper, but there is a chasm between us that we politely step around. He wears his guilt like a hair shirt. My regret is different, colder. I regret our silence not out of civic duty, but because I now believe we weren't just witnesses. We were seen. Acknowledged. And things that are acknowledged in the dark have a way of remembering you. Sometimes, in the dead of night, when the world is too quiet, I pull out that old, faded photo from the top of the Viper. In the foreground, are teenage faces, pale ovals of bravado. But in the bottom corner, a blur in the park below, just a smudge most would dismiss as a trick of the light. I've stared at it for years. That smudge is in the exact spot where the funnel cake stand stood. And it's shaped less like a man hiding, and more like a man looking up. Grinning up. He isn't captured in some jail. He's captured in that photograph, and in the silence we chose to keep. And I know, with a certainty that chills my blood, that our silence didn't protect us. It simply granted him the privacy to finish his work elsewhere, and to remember the two boys who watched him from the high place before scuttling back into their safe, little lives. He is out there. And he knows we are, too. The memory of that October afternoon in 2016 is not a memory. It is a phantom limb of terror, a ghost nerve that fires every time I descend into the underground. It was the autumn the world briefly lost its mind to clown sightings, a collective psychosis that felt like a bad meme until it became the texture of my reality, the smell of my own fear, and the reason I can no longer hear a subway chime without my blood turning to ice. That Wednesday was a study in ordinary gray. I was 16, a creature of habit, my identity tucked safely behind a screen and between earbuds. The walk from school to the 86th Street station was a blur of falling leaves and the distant, tinny beat of Drake's views. I was preparing for a chemistry test, the structured, predictable world of covalent bonds, a welcome refuge from the formless anxiety of adolescence. When the downtown 6 train arrived, its emptiness should have been a klaxon. In a city that pulses with crowded desperation, an entirely vacant car is a profound violation of nature. It feels less like luck and more like a staged set, a vacuum waiting to be filled. I, oblivious, walked into the center of it. I claimed a two-seater, spreading my books like talismans of normalcy. As the train lurched into motion, I cranked the volume, sealing myself in a sonic bubble. The world beyond the glass became a silent, speeding diorama, the sudden swallowing darkness of the tunnels, the fleeting, illuminated tableaus of platform 77th, 68th, each one a snapshot of lives I would never know. I was not a participant in the city, I was a consumer of it, a ghost riding a ghost train. This disconnection, I now understand, was what made me pray. I had voluntarily removed myself from the herd, and something had noticed. The deceleration for 96th Street triggered a muscle memory sequence so ingrained it bypassed conscious thought. Stand gather. Move to the door. My eyes remained locked on my phone, on a diagram of atomic orbitals. The doors hissed open. And the world split in two. The figure in the doorway was not just a man in a clown costume. It was an artifact of pure wrongness, a rip in the fabric of the mundane. The costume was a parody of joy rendered in a palette of despair, rainbow stripes dulled with grime, suspenders straining over a soiled yellow shirt, gigantic shoes that seemed rooted to the concrete. But the face was a disaster. The white base was a crumbling plaster mask, through which the sweat sheened, pallid skin of a man in his 40s gleamed. The blue eyebrows were two savage, downward strokes of anger. The red smile was a wound, stretched far too wide, revealing teeth that were yellow and neglected. He wore no wig, his own greasy, dark hair was plastered to his skull, the makeup bleeding into his hairline in a grotesque fusion of man and character. He did not move. He simply occupied the threshold, a silent monument to a joke nobody was telling. His head was cocked, his vacant, pale blue eyes fixed on me with a biologist's cold curiosity. He wasn't trying to get on. He was guarding. The first, gentle chime. Ding dong. My brain stuttered, caught between the imperative of my routine and the impossibility before me. I defaulted to civility, a pathetic, programmed response. I muttered "excuse me," and made to step around him. That's when he came alive. He didn't step. He flowed. His torso curved inward in a single, serpentine motion, bringing that cracked, stinking face within inches of mine. The smell was a brutal assault, the cloying powder, the sour stench of unwashed body, and underneath it all, a metallic, coppery tang, the smell of old blood, or fresh pennies, or both. His eyes, wide and bloodshot, held no madness I could name. They held nothing. A void. They consumed my reflection and offered nothing back. The second chime was a shriek. Ding dong. Adrenaline, pure and electric, detonated at the base of my spine. I shoved. My palm met the rough canvas of his suspender, and I propelled myself forward, stumbling out onto the platform as the doors whisked shut behind me, sealing the empty train, his trap, his lair, away from me. For a fraction of a second, there was silence. Then, the sound. Slap clap. Slap clap. It was the sound of his oversized shoes, but it was all wrong. It wasn't the comical flop-flop of a circus. It was a wet, heavy, determined impact, like raw meat hitting stone. I didn't look back. I ran. The 96th Street platform, usually a cramped thoroughfare, had been mysteriously emptied. It stretched before me, a clinical, tan-tiled gauntlet. I was a rat in a tube. The slap-clap echoed, growing closer, a sonic predator. I risked a glance. His gait was a broken marionette's sprint. Limbs flailed in a discordant, terrifying rhythm, as if each joint was operating on a different command. And in his right hand, held low and casual, was the knife. A chef's knife, its blade a cool 8 inches of honed steel. He wasn't brandishing it. He was merely carrying it, as if it were a tool for the task ahead. The sheer mundanity of his grip was what finally broke the last seal of disbelief. This was not a prank. This was purpose. My backpack became an anchor. My lungs burned. The exit stairs, that promised square of gray afternoon light, seemed to mock me by receding. A new, surreal fear blossomed. If I fell, would he stop? Would he simply stand over me, tilting his head in that same curious way, before bringing the knife down with the same casual efficiency? The thought lent wings to my terror. I hit the stairs, taking them 3 at a time, my hands squealing on the cold banister. I did not look back. I burst through the heavy steel door into the chaotic symphony of the Upper East Side, honking cabs, shouting vendors, the dense buzz of 1,000 conversations. The normalcy was almost as jarring as the horror. I collapsed against a building, fumbling for my phone. My 911 call was a series of choked keywords: clown, knife, chase, 96th Street 6. The operator's calm voice was an island in the raging sea of my panic. The 3 minutes until the squad car arrived were an eternity of scanning the crowd, expecting that violent splash of color to erupt from a deli or a passing bus. The police were professional, but their weariness was palpable. Another clown thing, the female officer sighed, not to me, but to the universe. Her partner went downstairs. His return, and his shrug nothing. He's gone. Was in some ways more terrifying than the chase. It meant he was efficient. It meant he knew the tunnels. It meant he had simply folded himself back into the city's dark fabric. I refused the ride home. I needed to move, to prove I still could. The 6-block walk was a journey through a suddenly hostile landscape. Every alley mouth was a potential stage for his reappearance. Every person wearing a bulky jacket hid a potential costume. My reflection in shop windows was no longer my own, it was a canvas onto which I projected his smeared, leering face just behind my shoulder. The true haunting began behind my own locked door. The police report was a closed case. For me, it was an open wound. The specificity of the event gnawed at me. The empty train. His positioning not on the platform, but in the doorway of my specific car. It felt less like a random encounter and more like an ambush. Had he been riding the line, peering into cars, waiting for a solitary, distracted target? Had the viral hysteria not created monsters, but simply given a pre-existing predator the perfect camouflage? For weeks, I was a prisoner of hypervigilance. Sleep brought dreams of endless, silent tunnels and the relentless slap-clap just out of sight. I abandoned headphones forever. On the subway, I developed a ritual: back to the wall, eyes in constant, sweeping motion, profiling every passenger for hidden bulk, for a too-still posture, for the distant, vacant stare. I became an expert in the architecture of fear, studying the blind spots of each station, the places where a man could stand and wait, unseen. I scoured the internet, not for comfort, but for confirmation. I needed to know if he'd been caught, if he'd done this to others. I found only the chaotic swirl of the national panic, blurry photos in South Carolina, a threat in Pennsylvania. My story had no digital footprint. It had been swallowed by the noise, a singular, terrifying event with no narrative closure. He was a ghost in the system, and my only proof was the permanent rewiring of my nervous system. The incident taught me that the most profound horror is not the unknown, but the known twisted into unrecognizable shapes. It is the childhood symbol of laughter repurposed as a vessel for silent malice. It is the trusted routine, the train, the door, the walk home revealed as a potential conveyor belt to nightmare. Years have passed. I still live in New York. I still ride the 6 train. I get off at 96th Street every day. But the ritual is sacred and grim. I never approach the doors until they are fully open, my body coiled, my eyes scanning the platform's depths. I have learned to listen not to the noise of the city, but for the silence within it, the held breath, the cessation of movement, the quiet that suggests a waiting presence. Because I now understand that the clown hysteria of 2016 was not about clowns. It was about the unsettling truth they revealed, that the world is a stage, and the scripts can change without warning. That the man waiting for you in a place you've always felt safe might not be following any script you recognize. He might just be standing there, in a dirty costume and a painted-on smile, holding a knife with comfortable familiarity, waiting to see what you'll do next. And the punchline, the terrible, silent punchline, is that there is no joke. There's only the door opening, and what stands in the frame. The $30 an hour lifeguard job didn't just pay my bills, it slowly, meticulously rewired my understanding of normalcy. 2 years out of college, I was a ghost in the gig economy, a collection of W2s and 1099s haunting the fringes of hyperlink https://indeed.com/indeed.com. DoorDash, TaskRabbiting, temp admin work. It was a numbing carousel of just enough. Then I saw the listing, a siren song in a sea of minimum wage noise, private hotel lifeguard. Evening/night hours. $30/HR must be fluent in English. Spanish speakers need not apply. The dissonance was immediate. A pool open from 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. in a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood, explicitly barring Spanish speakers. It was so illogical it bypassed suspicion and landed squarely in the realm of the intriguingly stupid. I pictured some paranoid, wealthy hotel owner with a bizarre theory about language and liability. My curiosity, and the undeniable gravitational pull of that number $30 an hour overcame my reason. My Spanish wasn't on my resume. I could play the part. The callback was unervingly swift. A man with a warm, gravelly voice named Hef scheduled an interview for the next day. No corporate HR screening, no background check forms. Just a time and an address. The Sierra Vista Suites was a mid-tier, sprawling place done in the style I call vaguely Spanish colonial revival. Stucco walls, red tile roofs, a central courtyard with a burbling fountain that smelled faintly of algae. It tried for charm but landed on weary. Hef, who met me at the main office, was the opposite of what his nickname suggested. He was jovial, round-faced, with a laugh that shook his shoulders. He clapped me on the back, called me Chief in return, and walked me toward the pool area, chatting amiably about the hotel's need to innovate its revenue streams. Then, we turned a corner by the ice machine, and the air changed. Leaning against the stucco, a tall, lean man with a face like weathered teak watched our approach. His arms were crossed. His eyes, black and unblinking, tracked me with a dispassionate intensity that stripped away Hef's friendly chatter. This was Esteban. Hef's demeanor shifted subtly, the bonhomie dialing back a few notches. Without a word of greeting, Esteban pushed off the wall and stepped directly into my path. He launched into rapid, colloquial Spanish, his voice a low monotone. Mucho calor para abril, no? Parece que el verano quiere llegar temprano. Tu primera vez por aquí. Hot for April, no? Seems summer wants to come early. Your first time around here. It was a test. A blunt, unsubtle probe. I let the words wash over me, keeping my face a polite, slightly confused blank. I offered a small, awkward smile and shrugged, turning to Hef as if for translation. A beat of silence, then both men erupted in laughter. Esteban's stern face cracked into a wide smile, and he thrust out a hand. Just messing with you, man. Welcome aboard. The tension dissolved, but the aftertaste was bitter. The job listing hadn't been a mistake. The pool itself was a beautiful, serpentine thing, lit by underwater lamps that made the turquoise water glow against the encroaching dusk. My lifeguard stand was a white wooden throne overlooking it all. Behind it, set back against a tall privacy wall, was a long, low building with a single metal door. The pool house, Hef called it. He gave me the keys, one for the cash box, one for the pool house door. The rationale was laid out with casual plausibility. Night hours to attract a different clientele: working people, night owls. The no Spanish rule lets you avoid getting drawn into arguments, Jeev, Hef said, winking. You just point to the rule sign and smile. My duties: guard, collect entry fees from non-guests, $20 a head, cash only, and most importantly, if anyone showed me a blue wristband, I was to let them into the pool house. No questions, no logs. Just open the door, why yet? Hef handed me a stack of crisp blue wristbands. For the VIPs, he said. The first few weeks were deceptively tranquil. The night swim concept was surprisingly popular. Families with hyperactive kids, couples on cheap dates, shift workers looking to unwind. I blew my whistle, pointed out the no running sign, and collected a steady stream of 20s. The money piled up in the lockbox. It felt easy. Too easy. The first wristband appeared a month in. A man built like a bull, with a quiet intensity, nodded at me, rolled up his sleeve to reveal the blue band, and stood silently by the pool house door. I fumbled with the key, the metal clinking loudly in the now quiet night. The door opened to a glimpse of a dark interior before he slid inside, and I closed it, hearing the solid thunk of the automatic lock. An hour later, he emerged, his gym bag hanging noticeably heavier from his shoulder. He didn't make eye contact as he left. After that, they came with increasing frequency. Sometimes alone, sometimes in quiet pairs. Men, mostly, of all ages, but all with that same subdued, purposeful air. They never swam. They showed the band, entered the pool house, and left 30 to 45 minutes later. Their arrivals and departures became a silent, rhythmic counterpoint to the splashes and laughter of the legitimate pool users. Then came the money. A man in a polo shirt would hand me a 50 for his $20 entry. Keep it, he'd mumble. A woman would pay for 2 kids with a $100 bill and wave away the change. At first, it was a trickle, then a steady flow of overpayment. When I called Hef, concerned about the accounting, his warmth evaporated. People are generous, or they're bad at math. Don't worry about it. The line went dead while I was still speaking. That click was the sound of the last door closing between the fiction of my job and the reality of it. The mental dam broke. The wristbands. The pool house. The deliberate overpayments, not tips, but a way to move cash through a legitimate-seeming drawer. The night hours, perfect for obscured comings and goings. I was a living, breathing layer of operational security. I was the plausible in plausible deniability. A functioning, guarded pool is a community feature. It draws families, creates ambient noise, generates innocent paperwork. It is not a place police look at twice. Every wristband wearer was camouflaged by a dozen splashing children. Every cash transaction was laundered in the chlorinated light of a family-friendly amenity. My presence, my uniform, my very normality, was the perfect front. The Spanish ban ensured the front man couldn't understand the whispers in the shadows. The realization didn't make me quit. That's the terrifying part. The money was too good, and the danger felt abstract, managerial. My hands, I told myself, were clean. I was just a lifeguard. The cognitive dissonance was seductive. The dynamics shifted after I pulled a boy from the deep end. He'd sunk quietly, a small shadow in the glowing blue. It was a clean, quick save, more alertness than heroism. As I handed the coughing child to his frantic mother, a hush fell over the pool, then a smattering of applause. The next day, Hef and Esteban were at the gate. Esteban's usual icy demeanor thawed into something resembling human gratitude. The boy was his nephew. "You have a guardian angel here, Mijo," Hef boomed, putting a heavy arm around my shoulders. That night, a small group of wristband wearers I'd come to recognize toasted me with tiny cups of espresso laced with something stronger. One, a man with a scar tracing his jawline, raised his cup and said in Spanish, to our quiet friend on the chair, "May his eyes stay on the water, and his ears hear only the splashes." The others chuckled, a low, knowing sound. The toast wasn't for my bravery, it was a reminder of my designated blindness. The incident cemented my role. I was no longer just useful camouflage, I was a lucky charm, an asset that had proven its value. Greetings became more familiar, nods more significant. The overpayments grew larger. I was being woven into the tapestry of the operation, thread by thread. The unraveling began with my mother's call. My mother, whose voice was a tether to a world where rules mattered, never called during my shifts. When her name flashed on my screen, a cold dread pooled in my gut. I climbed down and retreated to the shadowy alcove by the maintenance shed, turning my back to the pool. "Mijo, ¿estás bien? Tu hermano dijo que te vio con gente rara." "Son, are you okay? Your brother said he saw you with strange people." I assured her I was fine, my Spanish flowing in a hushed, automatic stream. We spoke for 3 minutes. For 3 minutes, I was not the monolingual lifeguard. I was her son. I ended the call and turned. Esteban stood 6 feet away, partially obscured by a bougainvillea, a statue carved from shadow and suspicion. He hadn't been there when I started. How long had he been listening? The friendly mask was gone. His face was a closed door. The air between us grew thick and cold. "How long have you known Spanish?" he asked in English, his voice devoid of all inflection. My mind raced, a frantic animal in a trap. I'm learning." That was my tutor. I was practicing. The lie was pathetic, transparent. He didn't call me on it. He didn't move. He simply stared, his black eyes performing a brutal calculus. I could see the variables flickering behind them, my usefulness, my knowledge, the risk of my ears understanding the wrong conversation, the risk of me being a cop, or becoming a witness. The fact that I had just saved a member of his family complicated the equation, but it didn't solve it. My heart tried to escape my chest. This was it. The paranoia I'd held at bay crashed over me. The secluded alcove, the loud pool masking sound, the high privacy walls. I was a problem in a very, very quiet place. Finally, after an eternity, he gave a single, slow nod. Okay. He turned and walked back toward the hotel office, not looking back. I returned to my stand, my legs weak. For the next 2 hours, I was a puppet of adrenaline. Every laugh from the pool sounded forced. Every shadow held a shape. I was certain I was being watched, evaluated for my final scene. Would it be an accident in the deep end after hours? A meeting in the pool house that I wouldn't leave? 10 minutes before my shift ended, he returned. He didn't climb the stand. He stood below me, looking up, his face back to its usual, unreadable calm. "Come an hour early tomorrow," he said, his voice flat. "I have a new opportunity to discuss. More responsibility. Better pay." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded stack of bills, and placed it on the first step of my stand for your good work. Then he left. I stared at the money. A new opportunity. The phrase echoed in the hollow of my skull. It was a promotion into the darkness. An invitation through the metal door. There was no world in which accepting it led anywhere but deeper into a labyrinth with no exit. The $200 felt like infected tissue. I left it on the step. I drove home using every evasive driving technique I'd seen in movies, my eyes glued to the mirrors. I sent the family emergency text and powered off my phone. The paranoia that followed was a living thing. It turned my apartment into a cage. I saw Esteban's face in every stranger on the street. For months, I flinched at the sound of a car idling outside. I moved apartments. I took a miserable, low-paying office job just to disappear into a crowd of normalcy. Years later, the fear has mellowed, but the understanding has crystallized. I wasn't just a lifeguard. I was a vital component in a sophisticated machine. The pool was the perfect front, a source of innocent noise, light, and activity that rendered the sinister traffic in its shadow invisible. I was the trusting face, the official receipt book, the reason cops would wave and drive past. The overpayments were a clever, low-level cash infusion. The wristbands were the credentials for the real business, hidden in plain sight. I often wonder about the new opportunity. I see it in my nightmares, a dim room in the pool house, a desk, a thicker stack of cash, and a choice that isn't a choice at all. By running, I chose the only path that kept my soul, if not my peace of mind, intact. Sometimes, on a still night, I catch the faint, chemical scent of chlorine on the breeze. My breath hitches. My palms sweat. And I am back on that white wooden stand, the glowing water before me, the locked metal door at my back, feeling the weight of a gaze from the shadows that understood my true purpose better than I ever did. I wasn't there to save lives. I was there to help hide the evidence that they were being destroyed, one blue wristband at a time, just a few feet away.